On Friday, August the 18th, 2017, an expedition led by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen discovered the wreck of a ship that had been lost to history for over 72 years. This ship, like so many before it, had been sunk by enemy action during the Second World War, but not before it had completed one of the most important missions, and in by doing so, had helped not only end the war, but reshape the direction of history itself. The wreck was that of the USS Indianapolis, and this is its story. Before we start, I want to say that this video is something special, not only for me, but also for you. War Gaming, the awesome company behind the hugely popular World of Tanks, World of Warships, and World of Warplanes, approached me with a sponsorship opportunity. I've been playing World of Warships for the last few days, and it's honestly one of the best games I've played in a long time. The graphics are phenomenal, and there is a steady pace of missions and events, so it never gets boring. World of Warships combines not only World War history, but is also the perfect balance of action and strategic gameplay. You can command a massive naval fleet using 4 classes of warship that feature some of history's most iconic war vessels that you can upgrade in a variety of ways, including the USS Indianapolis, which you will find out all about the real ship and its fascinating but tragic history in this video. You then take your ship into battle in strategically designed environments from all over the globe, from Okinawa to Dunkirk, and every match is a unique experience, so the action never ends. They have really thought of everything, from weather affecting the battles, so you really feel like you're there, right down to the realistic rust on the boats. Their development team, which is straight out of Russia, takes an average of 6 months to create a single ship in-game, and there are over 200 of them across 8 different nations. World of Warships utilizes 2 in-game currencies for buying and upgrading ships, crew, and camo: credits and doubloons. Credits are gained in battle, and doubloons are earned in a special manner. Check out the link in the description below for a special Top 5s code that will give the first 300 new users 250 doubloons and 1 million credits. You also get the HMS Campbelltown premium ship, which is the US destroyer that was handed over to the Royal Navy during the Second World War. 1 port slot and 3 days premium time, which allows you to progress faster in the game. It also rolls across to all 3 awesome games, so when you purchase it for one game, you automatically get it for World of Tanks and World of Warplanes. Now don't forget that this game is totally free to download and play, with the option for in-game purchases. And if you're quick and one of the first 300 to use that code, with those perks, you'll already have an awesome head start, so you want to take advantage of it. Anyway, let's get right into this video and learn all about the USS Indianapolis, whose sinking resulted in the most shark attacks on humans in history, and some of the most harrowing stories of survival in the last century. The cruiser race. After World War I, the Washington Naval Treaty aimed to impose limits on the construction of new warships and determine the maximum tonnage for certain types of warships. Battleships, for example, which were at the time still the most powerful types of warship on the open oceans, were limited to 35,000 tons. Ships already under construction that exceeded this figure were often converted to aircraft carriers, which were not covered by the treaty. The limit on cruisers, however, were not so precise. A cruiser was smaller than a battleship, but larger than a destroyer, and had the range to roam far out to sea to disrupt an enemy's sea lanes, where much of its supplies were transported. A limit of 10,000 tons were imposed on cruisers, but at first there was no limit on how many could be built, leading to a race to build more to guarantee dominance over any rivals. In 1930, the US authorized construction of 2 new light cruisers for the US Navy. The first was known as the Portland class, the second was named the Indianapolis. The design. Constructed in Camden, New Jersey, the Indianapolis weighed in just under the 10,000 ton limit, making it a true treaty cruiser as they were known, while being 610 feet long and 66 feet wide. Powering the cruiser were 8 White Forster boilers and 4 Parsons geared turbines that output 107,000 horsepower via 4 propellers. This translated into a top speed of 32.7 knots, while range was around 10,000 miles unrefueled. Main armament comprised 9 8-inch 55 caliber main guns mounted in 3 triple turrets, These could theoretically hurl a 260-pound high-explosive shell out to a range of 25.5 kilometers. Recognizing the increasing threat from aircraft, the Indianapolis was also designed with 8 5-inch 25 caliber anti-aircraft guns. During construction, its intended armor was deemed insufficient and was increased to over 5 inches around key areas. The Indianapolis was expected to operate as a flagship for task groups, and so had accommodation for an admiral and his staff. The cruiser also had a significant air component, carrying 3 to 4 float planes that were catapulted off the rear of the ship and would then land alongside it to be hauled back aboard by a crane. Early service. The Indianapolis was commissioned on November 15, 1932. Captain John M. Smealy would be the first commanding officer of the new ship. The first year of the cruiser's surface life was a busy one, with the ship undertaking a cruise to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and then through the Panama Canal to conduct training off the coast of Chile in the South Pacific. Upon completing this, she then returned to the Atlantic, and on July 1st, 1933, the cruiser welcomed aboard President Franklin D. Roosevelt for the first time. Roosevelt would in the coming years make several voyages aboard the Indianapolis, and eventually it became the ship of state. But despite its diplomatic role, it was still a US warship, and when it wasn't carrying the president, it was serving as an admiral's flagship, such as the commander of scouting force for maneuvers in 1938. By this time, the clouds of war were gathering, with a resurgent German branching out in Europe, and an increasingly aggressive Japan in Asia. The US, meanwhile, had adopted a policy of isolationism, and so the US Navy's primary role was to safeguard American interests and shipping, while diplomats from both sides argued. To meet this challenge, on February 1st, 1941, the US Navy was reorganized into 3 main fleets based on their geographical locations. The Indianapolis found itself the flagship of Task Force 3 under Vice Admiral Wilson Brown out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On December 7th, 1941, the Indianapolis was engaged in a mock bombardment on Johnson Island when it received news that Pearl Harbor had been attacked by the Japanese. World War II had begun. War service. The Indianapolis joined up with the aircraft carrier USS Lexington under Task Force 12 and attempted to hunt down the Japanese fleet that had attacked Pearl Harbor. Unable to locate them, the Indianapolis returned to Pearl Harbor and was then assigned to Task Force 11, with whom they would first see action on February 20th, 1942 in Papua New Guinea. The force was attempting to get the Lexington's aircraft in range of the Japanese base at Rabaul when they were spotted by a Japanese flying boat. The Japanese 24th Air Flotilla attacked the American force with their entire complement of Mitsubishi G4M1 bombers, a total of 17 aircraft. The defensive fire from the task force, including the Indianapolis, brought down all but 2 of them. Following this action, the Indianapolis was ordered to put into San Francisco to undergo a refit of equipment. Upon completion, the Indianapolis escorted a convoy bound for Australia, before steaming to the North Pacific to participate in the Aleutian Campaign. On February 13th, 1943, while sailing off Attu with 2 destroyers, the Indianapolis attacked and sank the Japanese cargo ship Akangi Maru, taking the whole crew with it. In late 1943, the Indianapolis bombarded Japanese shore positions on Tarawa and Makin under Operation Galvanic, before putting into San Francisco again for an overhaul and new equipment. As 1945 went on, the cruiser continued supporting carrier operations on and around the Japanese home islands, including Okinawa, until on March 31st, 1945, the Indianapolis would be hit by a kamikaze aircraft, killing 9 sailors. Despite sustaining heavy damage, the Indianapolis managed to return to San Francisco for repair under its own power. The sinking. The repairs offered the chance for the Indianapolis to receive yet another major upgrade that included new fire control systems, communication equipment, and electronic countermeasure devices. Expecting to rejoin the fleet, the crew under Captain Charles McVeigh were surprised to learn they had been selected to carry out an important assignment. It involved carrying a secret cargo to Tinian Island. Not even McVeigh knew the nature of the cargo, as his crew set sail on July 16, 1945. That very same day, the US successfully tested their first atom bomb. McVeigh's cargo was in fact key components for the Little Boy atomic bomb that would eventually be dropped on the city of Hiroshima. Mission completed, the Indianapolis then went on to Guam, where a number of crew members whose tours of duty were up departed before the cruiser sailed on to the Philippines for gunnery practice with the battleship Idaho. At 1214 hours on the morning of July 30th, 1945, the cruiser was spotted by Captain Hashimoto aboard the Japanese submarine I-58, who fired 6 torpedoes at it, 2 of which struck the American vessel. The Indianapolis began to sink so quickly that the men had almost no time to launch the lifeboats. Just 12 minutes after the attack, the Indianapolis had rolled over on her left side and sank. Yet despite this, nearly 880 of her 1,197 crew made it off. What followed has become one of the most tragic and harrowing stories of survival in recent history. The survivors clung to anything that could float, since not all of them had time to grab life jackets. But as they bobbed in the sea, they were covered in oil that had leaked from the ship's tanks, making many of them extremely ill. Hopes for rescue were raised by the radio operators, who told them all that they had time to send out an SOS, but in reality, no one had received it. They also took comfort in knowing that the USS Idaho was expecting them in just a few hours, meaning the Navy would soon know something had happened and go looking for them. However, the message that the Indianapolis was coming had not got through to the battleship, which meant when the cruiser was overdue, nobody had cause for alarm. It would be a painful 4 days before a US Navy patrol plane spotted the survivors completely by accident, during which time many had died from dehydration, saltwater poisoning, or been killed by scores of sharks that had descended upon them. The terror the men must have experienced floating helplessly for days in the water, while sharks picked them off one at a time, is unimaginable to those who were not there. After being spotted by the patrol plane, a Catalina flying boat arrived, and its pilot, having seen the sharks circling the men, disobeyed orders and landed near them to at least get some of the men out of the water. Several ships were also dispatched to rescue the crew, but by then the damage had been done. Of the 880 men in the water, only 317 survived long enough to be rescued, making the sinking of the USS Indianapolis the worst single disaster in US Navy history. So that's the history, the story, and tragic end to one of the most iconic ships to have ever sailed. Don't forget to check out the link in the description to take advantage of the bonus doubloons and credits in World of Warships, and also the awesome premium ship you'll get if you're the first 300 people to use the code. You can use the USS Indianapolis in World of Warships, and it's the most realistic experience you're ever going to get, besides actually being on board. Click on that link in the description to get started, and I'll see you over in World of Warships.